This idea that this army of 30 engineers who are essentially, if you're not designing or if you're not putting in your own thought, you're kind of just code translators, right? Like that is what is going to be replaced. Once you sort of know the solution, as in like uh, you know the solution and you can instruct it, I think you can sort of move a lot further compared to having a team of 30 engineers. Like 2 to 3 engineers can actually accomplish the same amount of.
This is the first episode I'm doing this with Siddharth. Siddharth is a veteran software engineer with over 17 years of experience building multiple applications. Maybe many of you would have used at least one of the applications he has built, and he has worked a lot on artificial intelligence and machine learning space. So the idea of this podcast is to kind of discuss our thoughts on how AI is going to change how people are going to work in the coming years and how people are going to build products in the coming years and how things are going to change. Siddharth, over to you. I'm going to start with a very simple question, right? I mean, we have discussed this many times over. How do you see AI agents complementing human workforce and in corporate settings, and especially in daily work? It's around AI going to replace humans, a lot of people getting
Right.
fired, and you have been in this space for a very long period of time. What is your thoughts on it?
I think there is a ramp up period to all of this. There is like everyone's talking about, okay, if I can fire half my workforce and then replace it with AI. But in reality, it requires probably, let's say, 6 to at least a year worth of time to invest to really gain that productivity boost. It's not that you can just simply use that ChatGPT interface or whatever model you're using to benefit from that. So I feel that a lot of that motion is driven by this hype and sort of jumping into that wagon. But if you really want to benefit from it, I think there is an upfront cost. You need to spend time building agents, thinking about what is the area you want to actually boost productivity in, where can you trim your teams. I feel, yeah, it's a bit more involved than people sort of actually speak about. So that effort, I don't know how many will be willing to put in, because if you look at how companies actually work, or at least the ones that we know of, a lot of it is focusing on just build it now, we'll figure out how to tackle it later on. There are very few companies who consciously invest in spending time researching about the future, sort of building things for the future. Not, I mean, willing to sort of take the hit today. Careful planning, careful, very meticulous thinking. I don't believe that companies can just simply say that, okay, here's a ready-made tool, I will start using it. Because if it is
Yeah.
another SaaS product, you're pretty much going to be spending just as much, probably in a
Yeah.
different way.
I've personally been speaking to many founders in India. Everybody want to implement some sort of AI into their system, at least to say that we are using AI. Right? But the understanding or the thought process is very limited to using chatbots and
Right.
implementing a chatbots and solving the problem. But I think it's just scratching the surface of what is the potential of implementing AI solutions into the workflows. Because coming back to kind of a technology side of things, where I know that you are currently working on a product where it's kind of the tool is kind of going to replace a larger chunk of the day-to-day work done by software engineers. Can you explain a bit more on that front and how you see engineering work is going to years with how the tech is evolving?
I mean, I can't go into great details for obvious reasons, but there is tremendous gain to be had using these language models. At least when I sort of started looking into it, I was completely overwhelmed by how efficient it can make everyday life. It takes a lot of work to get it right. There is a lot of things that are so small that you probably ignore, and then you realize that, okay. But if you just take normal everyday workflows using things like ChatGPT, there is this thing called Cursor that the OpenAI team has launched, Copilot, and you just start working with that. Automatically, your efficiency sort of is several folds better. Then you sort of start looking at it at a much sort of broader plane, right? A lot of these tools deal with very small focused areas. You can actually have much broader impact when you start looking at project level stuff, or like feature level stuff, or things which are at a slightly bigger, what do you call, chunk of work. And when you start looking at that, there is immense productivity. The only, I would say, fundamental difference in how we sort of think about it today versus how I think people will think about it in the future is that right now, I think most companies look at product managers and senior engineering folks as the brains, right? Like sort of they decide the systems, they design the systems, they create specifications, and then it's sort of you identify the executable tasks, and you have like a team of say 30 engineers who will sort of keep converting that specification into code. Now, this idea that this army of 30 engineers will who are essentially, if you're not designing or if you're not putting in your own thought, you're kind of just code translators. That
Yeah.
is what is going to be replaced. Now, as long as you
Mm.
can structure that solution, like there are two problems that the way I look at it is knowing the solution and
Mm.
then knowing how to instruct these LLM tools or language models to solve the problem are the two main structures. So once you sort of know the solution, as in like uh, you know the solution and you can instruct it, I think you can sort of move a lot further compared to having a team of 30 engineers. Like 2 to 3 engineers can actually accomplish the same amount of work. But that whole initial part where you're structuring the solution becomes key. There are a lot
Yeah.
of challenges when you work with these models, right? Like you cannot provide super huge context. If you do provide super huge context, it has this thing where it'll forget the middle part of the context. It'll also sort of give you, if you're not very specific, it'll also give you sort of random results. It'll hallucinate. It'll give you all sorts of weird things. So those kind of problems are through that initial phase of planning that you solve. So my thing is that yes, life is going to be a lot better for senior folks. At the same time, I don't know, or I think the bar becomes significantly higher for junior folks as well. They will have to know a lot more to sort of get into the space.
Yeah, so I think going to become a space for specialists in the coming days. Somewhere I read, I think Naval or someone saying that specialization is for insects. I don't know in what context you're saying, and he was kind
Uh,
of promoting everybody should be a generalist, probably from a context of running businesses. But if you are not running a business per se, and if you are in the space looking out for jobs, I think being a specialist in your own space becomes the way to go about it. Is that something that you are hinting, or?
not that kind of thing. So I actually believe in the thing. So there is this guy called Jeremy Howard who he runs a company called Fast AI, which was sort of like before all these LLM models. I think that was what got me really interested in this whole machine learning and deep learning space. And the thing where says also, like, if you have to really make a dramatic difference in any domain, you need a team of generalists to sort of actually think of it from both the top down, where like what is the application of it, how can I actually put it to use, and a more practitioner's perspective rather than being very academic. But what I mean here is that for somebody who's just getting into the field, you don't have that visibility or perspective of what are the structural components involved to sort of gain the mileage that you can from an LLM
Yeah.
or any sort of model. So because you don't know what you don't know, it is a limiting factor. So how can you sort of absorb all that? That's a separate discovery or challenge for somebody getting into the field. There's already a lot of stuff, right? Like you think about somebody being a full stack engineer, it's a nightmare. It's an uphill battle. Like it's never enough. And
Uh,
now when you add all of this to it, yes, it is a challenging field. But yeah, I think that is the thing. Like how do you sort of understand the entire life cycle and then
uh,
uh, sort of be able to sort of function this way, which is something that comes from experience. I won't expect somebody young to know that, but yeah, that will probably be the expectation.
So, from a fitness coaching perspective, while building Alpha Coach, we built it together, right? So, at
Hmm.
that time, we were kind of exploring a lot of other applications. Last year in the beginning, there was a whole hype around everybody wanting to jumping into AI, and a lot of apps started with putting AI into their systems, largely as chatbots. And the biggest challenge I saw was that lack of specialists being involved in prompting the outcome, right? And I've seen that I've extensively used OpenAI to see whether it can build good training programs. Surprisingly, good programs can be built, but the level of prompting that needs to be required, you need a SME in space to kind of
Right,
build that. That's not something a product manager or engineer can be able to do because it's a very very specialized.
right,
And same with nutrition for that matter. It's such a deep subject, like you need people with a lot of years of experience to kind of build those programs. I think in any field, those specialists are gonna their
True.
inputs are required. And one big problem I see is that people building in tech feel that, oh, I don't need specialists anymore because I got
Hmm.
this model in place, and whatever question I ask, I kind of they kind of suddenly jump to the peak stupidity of a Dunning-Kruger curve, like on
Hmm.
day one, saying that I ask a question, I get an answer. That's so okay. I mean, it seems to be right, right? I think that applies across the spectrum in tech, fitness,
True.
finance. A combination of let's say subject matter experts in that particular field, let's say a banking or a finance, plus people who know how to kind of build these to give the right outputs in a scalable pattern, that becomes the right teams to kind of build good products.
It was like a great example, right? Like I think there is sort of this whole idea that you need domain expertise. Like you cannot just because you have a calorie value or something like that, you cannot
Mm,
just write a meal plan for somebody. There has to
mm,
be this domain expert who understands nutrition, who understands, how does that translate to this person's problem, fitness in general, is needed.
mm,
And without having sort of at least a paper solution or some sort of model that you work with, you cannot
mm.
really instruct a model or an AI to sort of solve that problem for you because you have nothing to go by. And I think that
Yeah.
is a classic problem. And I think a lot of people think that the first answer is actually going to be a good answer, but it takes a long while to sort of get it consistently right, right?
So coming to that, so we discussed, the initial models were not being very deterministic, right?
Hmm.
With the GPT in place, there are solutions now in place which actually kind of gives you kind of a deterministic output to the problems that we give to the models, right? How did that change from, let's say, from six to 8 months back to now?
You're referring to the seed parameter on
Yeah, yeah,
GPT-4
yes,
and I think 3.5 Turbo also.
yeah,
It's great. Like so, from if you're using one model, it helps a lot. Like it gives you the same response the next time you ask that question, right? That is
no,
helpful.
yeah,
But what I mean from deterministic systems is more like let's say you have, just to start with a very basic example, right? You have a model, you give it an input, it gives you the output. That is fine. But generally, when you build
mm,
large workflows, for example, let's take the example of writing code or
mm,
generating a report based on some information that is in your database. All of this will probably not be done by one agent. Like there will be multiple small agents, each doing something specific. And you will
yeah,
probably use multiple models, or maybe you use, let's say, one model. The thing is,
mm,
tomorrow you identified something that you want to change, or so you make an update to the prompt in one or two places.
yeah,
Now, the new result may not
mm,
vary significantly, but you also don't know, have you sort of gone back in quality or have you become better? Now,
yeah,
that is another thing, right? Like how do you benchmark effectively the quality of your results, whether it's getting better,
mm,
whether it's getting worse? That is, I mean, there are several solutions, and like a lot of people have put up their own frameworks. There are a lot of things to go by, but it's
mm,
still very, it's not an easy problem. It's not like writing unit tests for your code. At least for me, from my perspective, I think
yeah,
that will, I mean, you will also see a lot of companies now becoming that, right? Like becoming benchmarking frameworks for your LLM. Not
yeah,
entirely certain how that will scale across domains and stuff. But yeah, that is where we have built and sort of looked at different ways to sort of benchmark, but nothing consistently gives you that become better, and this is not regressed in any way. So
no,
I'm still sort of figuring that piece out.
mm,
And yes, the seed parameter does help, but
mm.
in the context of a larger problem, it's just one small piece that you can now control in a slightly more reliable.
Interesting. So but now we started discussing AGI more and more in the past few months, right? So I'm still confused. Is it more of a theoretical concept, or what's the difference between an AI and an AGI, right? So in our previous conversation, we said you kind of is working on some AGI models, right? Can you kind of bring some
Right.
clarity to that?
When you speak about AI, it's generally in reference to something more specific. Like you build AI, like they have this. Uh, it's called the one that plays chess or Go, AlphaGo. So those are very
Uh,
specific AI models that are created to do something very specific, to excel at something very narrow or a narrow domain. And when you think about AGI, it's slightly broader. It is almost like a very generally aware model which can do multiple things. Like if you go to like one of those chess playing models and you ask it to sort of build you a Excel sheet based on some information available online, it cannot do that. Whereas an
Ah.
AGI can do multiple things. It will probably translate some text for you. It can do multiple things. And what people talk about when they talk about agents is that it's largely a bunch of agents or maybe one agent working on a specific workflow or something very like something that you normally do. If you think about what we were doing with Zapier, it's a workflow,
Mm,
right? Like it's not one task. It involves fetching information from somewhere, modifying it in
mm,
another way. The same thing now can be done by multiple agents. The whole thing becomes like a group of agents working together to solve a problem. It's largely like that. And you can use the same model to do multiple different things, and it generally behaves like a very intelligent being. Think about it.
So it kind of take decisions on the go.
Yeah, it is intelligent about multiple things. That's largely how
Ah.
I think about it. Like, whereas a specific AI is generally, or an AI is generally specific to a domain, whereas
Mm.
AI is like general intelligence. Mhm.
So that is very interesting. That's very very human like, right?
Mm.
Now when that kicks in, will it create large amount of job losses in the market, right? So long back, there's a funny story. Long maybe many years back when computer came into picture, back home in Kerala, there were placards going "Computer Go Back," largely by the left movement, saying that, I mean, it's creating a lot of job losses, right? Nothing happened. People kind of started learning computers, getting better at it. It actually created a lot of job opportunities eventually. So now this. Now with AGI kicking in, how does things change? Because with just AI itself, I kind of automate a lot of workflows in Alpha Coach, for example, right?
Mm.
And a lot of things that earlier required people, it's actually not required. And to be honest, a lot of work is done better by these tools than humans. If you give the right prompts, it kind of generates better outcomes. Simple
Mm.
tools available in the market now with general intelligence kicking in. I'm sure in the next 1 year things are going to dramatically change.
Yeah,
How do you see the job scene gonna change?
right. So,
Uh,
if you think about any dramatic shift we've had in history, like even all the industrial revolution, everything, it was always followed by a period of depression where people were losing jobs. So,
uh,
I don't think this is going to be any different. There'll be people who will hold on to the way they were doing things or be very resistant to this because it is overwhelming. Like even for somebody
uh,
in tech,
uh,
just to sort of stay on top of things or just to understand the number of things that are happening, it is
uh,
overwhelming. So if you imagine people who don't have to deal with tech on a daily basis, I totally believe that it will be overwhelming.
yeah.
And there
Uh,
will be, how should I say, like there will be job losses, there will be shortage of opportunities that will
mm,
follow. But I think the immediate future, it won't be for the reasons for AI. Like what we are seeing now is for entirely other reasons why people are losing jobs or there isn't
mm,
opportunity. And
mm,
I think it is wrong to sort of the reason why people are being laid off is because of AI. Because for a company, let's just think about the ecosystem that we work in, right? Like for a
uh,
company to sort of gaining the productivity boosts of AI, you have to invest upfront. You have to spend
mm,
time building these models, teaching your team, or ensuring that there are specific things for specific companies, and these agents need
mm,
to actually be designed in such a way, or let's say you don't design it, you at least buy these tools in such a way
uh,
that it fits your workflow and adds productivity, which essentially means that
yeah.
a lot of the things that we were doing or hiring people for change. And that
Oh, yeah.
workflow, all of these things, it is error prone. It's not, it gets you, 70 to 80% of the way, but it is error prone. So you also need
It
some
is.
level of oversight. You need to ensure that.
Yeah.
So I feel that yes, there will be challenges, but if people start blaming AI in the next year, at least in
Uh,
India, I would
uh,
be very skeptical of, is this person really being real about this? Because it takes time. Like even for us,
mm,
and for us, we're tech savvy, so it
uh,
moves much smoother for us. So I don't
uh.
believe that will be the case. But yeah, I hope there is more, what do you call, careful thought put to it. Because yeah.
Another question that I wanted to ask earlier was this, right? So there's a lot of security concerns around using these models, right? Especially, let's say, in a space like a banking space, and you have worked in the finance space, building products which required high level of security, kind of from a data perspective, right? Where do we stand at this position, right? I mean, it's a lot of ambiguity around using these tools.
To be honest, I don't know. So very recently there was this tweet where it said that OpenAI has, so they had this thing where we will not work with the military, we will not work in domains which aid war or something like that. And now they've sort of gone back on it. Now, what
Huh.
is the consequence? How much? And I think if you saw the Elon Musk interview, and I think even Sam Altman said this, it's impossible to build a large language model without proprietary information. So
Yeah.
you don't really know what is the line. But if you look at the other side of it, the productivity gains are hard to ignore. It's like if something gets you so far, and if you think about a businessman, and if you tell him that okay, you can cut down your cost by say 30 to 50%, anybody will
Mm.
just jump on it. Like okay, whatever is the effort required, we'll put in. But if that helps me save money and make more profits, and
Mm.
that is the logic that applies. If you wait and watch, probably it will become harder to get into it because, or maybe it will actually get easier. Like the adoption will become simpler, but it'll start also
Mm.
becoming more expensive, is what I think. So I'm not entirely sure because the minute, but yeah, I could be wrong because also this whole SaaS wave is sort of fading. I don't know if you saw the DHH video, and like I've been calling that out for years, and I'm almost
Uh,
like pretty happy that that is happening. But yeah, like it, I don't know exactly which way it'll go, but once you have sophisticated solutions being offered as a plug and play offering, there will be a cost
mm.
associated to it.
Yeah.
If you get in early, you will have some benefits to this sort of journey. You will have more insight, you will have more ability to sort of think about it.
Mm.
But again, I like we may be sort of biased. We don't know, like, do all domains need it? Which domains don't need it? How will you carefully
Yeah.
do this? This requires a lot more thought and analysis. So yeah.
Implementing this just for the sake of implementing would be a movement in the wrong direction. So there are this legacy businesses which have been there for 10 years, 15 years, running solid businesses,
Hmm.
but the business owners or decision makers are still not very keen on adopting this AI because many of them still think that's a fact. If you think, this is, I think it will happen, but if businesses which start much recently who adopt these things faster can
Hmm.
outrun them in maybe 3 to 4 years time. So, for example, when COVID came in the beginning, there were a lot of people who didn't believe that. I mean, they said, I mean, it's a conspiracy theory. It doesn't happen. I don't wear a mask, kind of thing. I
Hmm.
kind of get that kind of a feel from some of the business owners who have been running business for a very long time, like 20
Hmm.
years, very successful businesses. Do you think that new startups in the same space adopting these products, building from the scratch, built for AI, thinking through how they can scale fast using these tools, will kind of eat this old businesses in next 3 to 4 years?
And that's something that I've thought about, right? Like when we speak about these adoptions, we speak with a lot of blanket phrases. But then when I
Mm.
start thinking about, like, okay, I have been running let's say, a farsan business for 30 years.
Ah,
Uh,
ah,
my thought would immediately be like, okay, how much gain would I have? Like, where is the profit? Where is this going to boost my productivity? Where am I going to gain that money? Let's say I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to gain that profit. I probably would not be bothered about it. It probably depends on the domain. So again, like you said, we always think in terms of tech and finance because that's largely what we've been exposed to. But if you think about this, I would probably not know. I'm sure there'll be somebody. Like I remember going to a dentist very recently, and
ah,
I hadn't gone to a dentist for a long, long time. And now
ah,
when I look at the tools that they have, it's
yeah,
so insane. Like there's this thing which will sort of, I don't know, there's a imaging tool which will sort of draw the entire 3D image of your jaw with the tooth onto
ah,
a TV that's in front of you, and you realize that okay, almost every dentist before that thought that okay, we don't need all this stuff. Initially, when you think about it, oh, it's just we just need bookings and payment solutions. We don't need.
yeah,
But now you look at
correct.
it, you feel a lot more confident, or at least reassured that okay, what is happening. So I'm guessing like every domain, every business has the area to sort of gain from it, but you actually need to think about how it actually benefits.
So this is kind of a takeaway, right? I mean, implementing these AI solutions just for the sake of it probably, I mean, makes no sense for many businesses until they kind of come with a problem that from where solving that problem through this route brings them a real traction in terms of revenue or productivity or that front. And I think that is a larger part of the time they need to spend time on, where look at the entire business workflow and see where the gaps are, where things can be optimized. That require probably a collaboration with people who have been running the business
Hmm.
and probably experts like us kind of coming in and probably stepping in. And we also see a lot of startups now in India saying that
Hmm.
AI and doing stuff in AI, and some of them are straight up doing simple Gen AI tools, right? And there is a lot of VC interest in building anything in AI, right?
Right.
How do you look at that? So funding going into AI based startups just because they call themselves AI. What is your thought on that? In my experience, a lot of VCs don't even do proper due diligence on what people are building. Just
Hmm.
because the fad is in that line, they go ahead and invest in that space. So with if some company or startup come and say that we are building in AI, what do you do as a check there? If you are to go ahead and invest in a business and they say we're building in AI,
So I would
what are
sort
the
of think in terms of like I don't see as a VC, your goal is basically to make X percentage on the capital you've sort of given. So
yeah.
they will probably distribute it in a way which will sort of give the maximum gain. But but I'm extremely curious. Let's say that you have received funding, you have a business going. Let's say, uh, the standard like 5 million or whatever valuation, 7 million valuation that you start off with, and
Mm,
now it's sort of a reasonably functioning operation. Would you get
mm,
another round if you tell your investor that I'm going to move to AI, which is going to give me significant gains? It's the same
mm,
business, but now with AI, I will gain X amount of productivity boost, which will eventually improve my bottom line by so much. Would they
yeah.
fund that? Like, I'm very curious because everybody's funding new ventures. Why not do
Uh,
that? Because this is a business that is already on the go. Sure, it may not have hit
mm,
profitability or whatever, but now you have a realistic chance of enabling them by doing that. So how would it work? I'm just curious, like, what is the mindset? Because what I've heard now is that companies are not getting funded until they get or demonstrate real profits or show actual revenue. And we've had almost I think 10 years or maybe more of no profits in so many companies. So
yeah.
very curious, like, would they enable all the people who they invested in to actually?
So Ketan and I, from Alpha Coach side, we have spoken to at least 100 investors. At least
Hmm.
Ketan would have spoken more. In fact, in the last 1 year, and there is definitely a lot of interest in the space. And I think, like I said, I mean, many of these venture capital funds does not do proper tech due diligence. They will do strong financial due diligence, but what is being built, and I see that's also a gap that they don't have people to kind of probably do a proper due diligence on what is being built and how is it being built. Is it modular enough? Is it scalable to what they claim it to
Hmm.
be? Right. Most of them are sold on stories. Of course, the company may be making generating profit and all. Will that profit scales to 10x, 20x, or revenue scales to 10x, 20x using the current stack they have built out? That is
Hmm.
something that most people don't do. Like I'll give you a good example, right, from a fitness coaching space. And now
Hmm.
there's a business running, having a thousand coaches conducting one-to-one coaching to their clients. And now they built in a tool which kind of acts like a co-pilot to kind of help these coaches handle now from 100 clients to 200 clients, right? No, that's massive jump in productivity over there. And of course there is possibility to kind of jump the revenue also that much, cutting down the cost that much. Obviously if that's a solution is being built out, it makes sense. It definitely makes sense to kind of invest in those businesses. But is it how businesses are evaluated at this point? I mean, it's a topic for a lot larger discussion.
True. Yeah, yeah, I would actually sort of, I mean, logically, why would an investor not enable a good business to just move into AI, like something that has been doing, or at least been in business for, let's say, 3 years, 4 years? Why not just
Hmm.
give them a little more boost to, unless, yeah, sure, the business model and all those things need to validate it, but this would be a legit case, at least in my books, to think about. Yeah.
Yeah, so for businesses which have hit a product market fit, a strong analysis of how it may take a few months time, right, analysis on where artificial intelligence can really kick
Hmm.
in and change the game for them makes real good sense. Probably not for businesses which has not hit a PMF, you have a strong PMF, the direction you're going to build, who is your customer, who is buying from you on a regular basis. If you are at that stage, I think this is the time yesterday.
I mean, we've done the whole thing with Alpha Coach. Now, if you think about it, would you have sort of fitted AI before or only after whatever we had shipped?
Yeah, yeah.
I've thought about it a lot. I'm curious to think about
Oh,
your
yeah, I
thoughts.
mean, and again, there are a lot of factors that come in play when you kind of make a decision, right? So context of how a decision is made matters a lot more, right? So from a context of your business in a certain stage in the life cycle, you're selling to a customer, certain set of customer, you're raising fund from a particular investor who is looking at a certain direction, and then of course, I mean, you take a decision based on that. So in a scenario where there is no limitations, there's unlimited fund, there is unlimited access to talent, then the decision makings are very very different, right? That is something that there is no rights or wrongs, because there is never a scenario where you can implement the best possible solution. I mean, then there is no problems to solve, right? Anybody can solve problems
No.
if there are no constraints. If you have a Microsoft funding you $10 billion, go crazy, that's a different story. Versus when you are on a limited budget, you want to build stuff, show revenues, build traction, then that's a different story. Like the same thing that you said, right? Having an upfront investment and have that willingness to take a hit for a long time before you see the result, that is something that only a few companies can afford. From that
Okay.
is the context from where I said that if you have PMF, you have a lot of clarity on the direction that you're moving, who is your customer, and that thing we said, spend a couple of months on how you're gonna implement AI to solve the problem of that customer. That becomes a lot more clearer. Then having experts stepping in and even spending a little more money to kind of solve that problem for them makes a lot more sense than in a very early stage going out and implementing AI for the sake of